In the previous lecture, we created a navigation drawer. In this lecture, we are going to add function to the items inside our navigation drawer. To do this, first I stop the emulator for the previous lecture. Then inside the onCreate method, after I got reference for the navigation view object, I'm going to type navigation view dot set navigation item selected listener. Inside the parentheses, I enter this. Now we are going to implement the main activity class that is in turn derived from the app_compat activity as navigation view dot on navigation item selected listener. You see that Android Studio is showing a red line under our main activity class declaration. I press Alt and Return and then click on Implement Methods. Now we must add the onNavigation item selected method to our class. I do this, you see that the error is now gone and the onNavigation item selected method was added to our class. When the user selects each of the items of the navigation drawer, the code inside this method is executed. For this method, we have an input parameter named item, and I'm going to change the return false statement inside the method to return true. Then above this statement, I'm going to define an integer. I name it ID, and I set its value to item.getItemID. The getItemID method returns the ID of the item selected by the user. Now, using conditional statements, we are going to define a function for each item. Since we have 7 items, I'm going to use the switch statement instead of the if statement. So I type switch ID and then I open and close its curly braces. I type case if our ID was equal to r.id.inbox_id, colon, which means that if the user selected the inbox item, then execute these statements. Break, my next case, if the ID was equal to r.id.start_id, then execute corresponding statements. The next case is r.id.send_id. 。 The next case is r.id.drafts_id. Now for the next item, I enter case r.id.allMail_id. The next case statement is for the trash item. So I type case r.id.trash_id. And the last case is for the spam item. So I type case r.id.spam_id. So because of the pretty large number of our items, we use the switch statement instead of if to run conditional code for each of the items of our navigation drawer. To see whether our condition works correctly or not, I'm going to use the toast statement. You can add your desired code to be executed for relevant case statements. Under the first case statement, I type toast.makeText. This method requires a context, so I pass it the getApplicationContext method. A comma. For its text, I enter the name of my item. Inside double quotes, I enter inbox. And for its duration, I enter toast.length_long and then .show. Now I'm going to copy this line of code and then paste it under all other case statements. Now I change the toast text accordingly for each of the items. So what we did was get the ID for the item selected by the user and store it in an integer. Then, using the switch statement, we defined a toast for each of the items. Then, following the switch statement, I type drawer layout dot close drawer. This line of code closes our navigation drawer after conditional code is executed. Now I must pass a gravity to this method. So I type gravity compat.start. This means that our navigation drawer will be closed to the left side of the screen. Okay, that's it for the onNavigation item selected method. Now let's run our project on the emulator. Alright, our application is running. Now I open the navigation drawer. For example, I'm going to select the inbox item. You see that the navigation drawer was closed and the toast message was displayed. This indicates that our conditional code worked properly. This time I click the second item from my navigation drawer. And yes, starred, sent mail, drafts, all mail, trash, and spam. Okay, that's it for defining functionality for navigation drawer items. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the difference between an item and a group in a navigation drawer menu. When you define an item in a navigation drawer, it acts like a button, like these last three items which are located in the subheader section. However, when you define an item inside a group, that item will have a hold characteristic. Like the first four items in our navigation drawer. For example, if I select the inbox item from the navigation drawer and I open the navigation drawer again, you see that the inbox item is still selected. You saw that we easily created a navigation drawer with a few lines of code without using different UIs or special libraries or complex fragments. At the end of this lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about the back button and its relationship with the navigation drawer. Note that by default, when the navigation drawer is closed, if we click on the back button, the activity must close. And since we have only one activity in our application, we must exit the application. However, when the navigation drawer is open, if we click on the back button, we expect the application to close the navigation drawer first, and if we click on the back button again, exit the app completely. Now I click the back button. You saw that our activity was closed and we exited the application. But we didn't want this to happen. Okay, I stopped the emulator. I'm going to add a method named onBackPressed after the onCreate method. I go to the code menu and then click Override Methods. In the window that appears, I start to search for onBackPressed, and I add this method to my class. When we click the back button, the code inside this method is executed. I simply define a condition inside this method. I type if drawer layout dot is drawer open, which means that if our navigation drawer is open, I also pass it a gravity parameter. I type gravityCompat.start, which means that if our navigation drawer was open from the left, then execute the code inside this block. Else execute super.onBackPressed. Okay, if my drawer layout was open, I type drawer layout dot close drawer, which will close our navigation drawer. Okay, this method requires a gravity argument, so I type gravityCompat.start, which means if the drawer layout is open, then close it to the left side of the screen. Now if we run our project on the emulator, when the navigation drawer is open, by clicking the back button, we expect the application to close the navigation drawer first, and if we click the back button again, we expect the application to exit. So I run the project on the emulator. Alright, our application is running. I open the navigation drawer. And I click the back button. You saw that our navigation drawer was closed. Now if we click the back button again, since our navigation drawer is not open, our activity will close and we will exit the application. I click the back button and yes, as we expected, the activity was closed and we exited the application. And that's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we are going to customize our navigation drawer.